Peterson Space Force Base, Colorado. 3:44 a.m. Sunday. The DF-41 is an intercontinental ballistic missile with a maximum range of 14,000 kilometers. In its standard configuration, it carries multiple independently targetable re-entry vehicles on a conventional ballistic trajectory. A high arc through space, predictable in its physics, engageable by the SM-3 and THAAD systems that the United States had deployed, precisely because the DF-41's trajectory was known and its intercept geometry was calculable. The PLA Rocket Force had spent 14 years studying that intercept geometry. What it had concluded, and what Operation Tianbing, Sky Soldier, was designed to exploit, was that the SM-3's engagement solution depended on one assumption that the conventional ballistic trajectory made possible: predicting where the warhead would be at the moment of intercept. Remove the predictability. Remove the intercept. The DF-41 variant that launched from its silo complex in Heilongjiang Province at 3:44 a.m. did not carry conventional re-entry vehicles. It carried a hypersonic glide vehicle, a maneuvering warhead that would separate from the DF-41 booster not at the top of a conventional ballistic arc, but at the edge of the atmosphere, at approximately 80 kilometers altitude, transitioning from its boost phase into a sustained hypersonic glide at Mach 15 to Mach 20 that would carry it around the curve of the Earth on a fractional orbital trajectory, not a full orbit. A fraction, enough to approach Andersen Air Force Base on Guam from the south, the direction from which the existing THAAD battery's engagement geometry was least optimized, rather than the northwest, which was the direction that the existing THAAD coverage had been specifically oriented to address based on the known DF-26B threat from Guangdong Province. Fractional orbital bombardment. The concept was not new. The Soviet Union had developed a fractional orbital bombardment system in the 1960s. The United States had detected it, assessed it, and eventually negotiated its elimination under the SALT II framework. The PLA had studied the Soviet program, noted that the technological constraints that had limited the Soviet system's accuracy had been resolved by the combination of precision inertial navigation and GPS-equivalent satellite positioning, and had spent 11 years developing a hypersonic glide vehicle that could execute a fractional orbital trajectory with a terminal accuracy measured in tens of meters rather than the kilometers that had made the Soviet system strategically limited. The launch was detected at 3:44 a.m. by the space-based infrared system. The DF-41's boost phase generated a thermal signature that SBIRS had been calibrated to detect in under 5 seconds of ignition. The alert reached Peterson Space Force Base's Combined Space Operations Center at 3:44 a.m. 41 seconds after the launch. The duty officer's first action was trajectory classification, determining whether the launch signature was consistent with a conventional ICBM trajectory or with an alternate profile. The trajectory classification algorithm ran against the first 14 seconds of boost phase telemetry at 3:45 a.m. The result came back in 3 seconds. Trajectory classification inconclusive. The boost phase insertion angle was inconsistent with a conventional ICBM arc toward any cataloged target. The insertion angle was shallower. The booster was burning longer. The classification algorithm's secondary assessment: possible fractional orbital profile. Possible fractional orbital profile. The duty officer had been briefed on this classification outcome in his initial Peterson assignment 2 years earlier. It appeared in the threat recognition module of his initial orientation training. It had never appeared on his actual display in 2 years of duty shifts. At 3:45 a.m., it was on his actual display. He initiated the fractional orbital threat protocol at 3:45 a.m., 61 seconds after launch. The protocol transmitted simultaneously to U.S. Space Command, Indopacom, Northcom, and the THAAD battery at Andersen Air Force Base on Guam. The THAAD battery's engagement control officer received the alert at 3:45 a.m. with the trajectory classification: possible fractional orbital, approach direction unconfirmed, do not commit interceptors until approach geometry is established. That instruction was the critical one. A conventional DF-26B, approaching Guam from the northwest, was engageable by the THAAD battery in its current orientation. A fractional orbital hypersonic glide vehicle approaching from the south required a different engagement solution, one that the THAAD battery needed 31 seconds of confirmed track data to generate with sufficient confidence for weapons commitment. The THAAD battery could not commit interceptors at 3:45 a.m. because it did not yet know where to send them. The hypersonic glide vehicle separated from the DF-41 booster at 3:47 a.m. at 83 kilometers altitude, moving at Mach 17.4. It began its glide phase, a sustained descent through the upper atmosphere at hypersonic velocity, its aerodynamic control surfaces adjusting its trajectory with small but operationally significant lateral maneuvers that kept its terminal aim point precise, while making its moment-to-moment trajectory unpredictable. The Space Fence radar at Kwajalein Atoll, a long-range space surveillance radar specifically designed to track objects in the high atmosphere and low orbit, acquired the glide vehicle at 3:48 a.m. at approximately 72 kilometers altitude, 100 kilometers from Guam. The Space Fence's track data was significantly more precise than the SBIRS thermal track alone. With Space Fence data, the trajectory classification became definitive: fractional orbital approach, southern vector, terminal phase approaching Guam from 185 degrees azimuth. The THAAD battery's engagement geometry had just been defined. At 3:48 a.m., the THAAD battery's engagement control officer received the definitive trajectory data and the approach azimuth. The battery's fire control system generated engagement solutions against the glide vehicle's projected track. This was new territory for the THAAD system. The THAAD Interceptor is designed to engage targets in the upper atmosphere and low space at velocities up to approximately Mach 8. The glide vehicle was approaching at Mach 14 in the terminal phase, slower than its peak glide velocity due to atmospheric deceleration, but still approximately 75% faster than the THAAD's design engagement velocity. The physics of the intercept were degraded, but not impossible. The engagement probability per interceptor, assessed by the fire control system's real-time algorithm, 31%. Lower than any previous THAAD engagement scenario. The battery's engagement doctrine for probabilities below 35%. Maximum interceptor allocation. The THAAD battery launched 6 interceptors at 3:49 a.m., all 6 against the single glide vehicle track. The first interceptor to reach the target zone would be operating at the absolute edge of the THAAD system's engagement envelope. Higher velocity, higher altitude, more extreme intercept geometry than the system had been tested against. The remaining 5 interceptors were staggered in their guidance solutions to cover the trajectory corridor within which the glide vehicle's terminal maneuvering could place it. Not a point intercept. A corridor intercept. The fire control team had invented the approach in the 7 minutes between receiving the definitive trajectory data and weapons release. They had not trained on this specific scenario. They had trained on the principles that made the improvisation possible. At 3:47 a.m., the SM-3 Block IIB option had also been evaluated. The SM-3 Block IIB, an upgrade to the Block IIA that had increased the interceptor's terminal kinetic energy and expanded its engagement altitude ceiling, was aboard the USS Lake Erie, positioned in the Pacific as part of the ballistic missile defense architecture that had been elevated in readiness for the Taiwan Strait tension period. The SM-3 Block IIB had a higher engagement ceiling than the standard Block IIA, designed specifically to address boost glide threats by engaging them during their boost phase before the glide vehicle separated from the booster. The Lake Erie's engagement window against the DF-41 boost phase had been open for 40 seconds, from 3:44 a.m. to 3:46 a.m., before the booster burned out and the glide vehicle separated. The SM-3 Block IIB launches had been authorized at 3:45 a.m., 60 seconds into the event, which meant the authorization had arrived during the engagement window, but the specific trajectory classification had not been definitive enough to generate a high-confidence intercept solution. 3 SM-3 Block IIBs had launched at 3:46 a.m. against the booster's projected trajectory. The booster had already completed its burn. The glide vehicle was separating. The SM-3 Block IIBs guided toward the booster stage debris. One achieved proximity detonation against a booster fragment. Two guided accurately, but found no intact target at their intercept point. The glide vehicle was 40 kilometers away on its own trajectory. The space fence track was being shared in real time with every relevant command and sensor system in the Pacific. At 3:49 a.m., as the THAAD interceptors were clearing their launch canisters, an AN/TPY-2 forward-deployed radar on Wake Island, positioned there 18 months earlier as part of the ballistic missile defense architecture upgrade, acquired the glide vehicle at 3:49 a.m. at 61 kilometers altitude, 2,100 kilometers from Guam. The Wake Island radar's track data was more precise than the space fence's long-range data. It was transmitted directly to the THAAD battery's fire control system at 3:49 a.m. The fire control system updated its engagement corridor calculations with the refined track. The update changed the optimal intercept solution for the 4th through 6th interceptors. Updated guidance data was transmitted to the 3 in-flight interceptors at 3:50 a.m. The interceptors received the update and adjusted their trajectories. The 4th interceptor's adjusted trajectory placed it 340 meters closer to the glide vehicle's projected terminal position than the original solution. The guidance update had been transmitted, received, and processed in under 60 seconds from sensor acquisition to interceptor trajectory adjustment. At 3:51 a.m., the lead THAAD interceptor reached its engagement zone. The glide vehicle was at 48 kilometers altitude, 700 kilometers from Guam, moving at Mach 12. The interceptor's guidance vehicle activated its seeker at 3:51 a.m. The glide vehicle was maneuvering, small lateral adjustments that shifted its position by 200 to 400 meters over each 30-second interval. The guidance vehicle's seeker was tracking the thermal signature of the vehicle's heat shield, which was generating significant infrared emission at Mach 12 in the upper atmosphere. The seeker acquired the track. The guidance algorithm projected the intercept geometry for the next 11 seconds of flight. The intercept solution required the guidance vehicle to accelerate and adjust its heading by 3.7 degrees to the left of its current vector. It executed the adjustment. At 3:51 a.m., the guidance vehicle closed on the glide vehicle. At 3:51 a.m., the glide vehicle executed its largest terminal maneuver, a 1.8-kilometer lateral displacement from its previous trajectory that the plan's design team had built into the terminal guidance sequence, specifically as a last-phase defensive measure against kinetic intercept. The maneuver was pre-programmed to execute at a specific altitude and time-to-target threshold, regardless of any interceptor activity the vehicle's sensors might detect. It was not a reactive maneuver. It was a scheduled one. And it had been scheduled to occur at the precise moment that a THAAD interceptor, pursuing a 31% engagement probability solution, would be most vulnerable to a target excursion. The first THAAD interceptor missed. Its guidance vehicle's adjusted trajectory had been optimized for the glide vehicle's pre-maneuver position. The 1.8-kilometer excursion placed the glide vehicle 400 meters outside the guidance vehicle's terminal guidance correction capability. The miss was logged at 3:51 a.m. The second interceptor was 12 seconds behind. Its guidance had been updated with the pre-maneuver track. It was also optimized for the pre-maneuver position. Its guidance vehicle seeker reacquired the vehicle after the maneuver at 3:51 a.m. with a 340-meter tracking error that its terminal correction was able to partially compensate. Partial compensation. The second interceptor achieved proximity detonation at 3:51 a.m., not a direct hit. A proximity detonation at 47 meters from the glide vehicle's guidance section. The blast fragmentation from the interceptor's warhead reached the glide vehicle's aerodynamic control surfaces and its guidance electronics bay. 2 of 4 control surface actuators were rendered non-functional by fragment impact. The guidance electronics bay sustained damage that interrupted the GPS navigation update sequence. A glide vehicle without 2 of 4 control surfaces and without GPS update capability is still a hypersonic vehicle moving at Mach 11 toward Guam. But it is a significantly less precise one. Its trajectory, without GPS correction, was reverting to its inertial navigation baseline. The inertial baseline had an accumulated error from the glide phase that, without GPS correction, placed the terminal aim point 1.8 kilometers from the programmed target. And without 2 of 4 control surfaces, its ability to correct that error in the terminal phase was severely limited. The third THAAD interceptor reached its engagement zone at 3:52 a.m. The glide vehicle was at 38 kilometers altitude, moving at Mach 10, its trajectory now partially degraded and its control authority limited. The guidance vehicle seeker acquired the modified thermal signature. The heat shield's emission pattern had changed slightly due to the fragment impacts, but the signature was still trackable. The guidance algorithm projected an intercept solution. The guidance vehicle adjusted. At 3:52 a.m., the third interceptor achieved direct contact with the glide vehicle's remaining intact guidance section. The glide vehicle's aerodynamic integrity was compromised. It did not continue on a controlled ballistic trajectory. It began tumbling, generating a debris field of fragments on unpredictable trajectories, most of which burned up in the remaining 38 kilometers of atmospheric descent. 3 fragments, structural components of the glide vehicle's composite heat shield, survived atmospheric entry and impacted on Andersen Air Force Base's north end, in the same area that had sustained a DF-26B taxiway impact in a previous engagement. The impacts generated no structural damage to facilities and no personnel injuries. The remaining 3 THAAD interceptors were redirected at 3:52 a.m. to track the debris field and engage any fragment assessed as posing a risk to populated areas. None were. The debris field impacted in unpopulated terrain on Andersen's northern boundary. All 3 interceptors were commanded to self-destruct at 3:53 a.m. when their intercept windows passed without viable targets. The B-52H alert aircraft at Andersen that had been airborne since 2:30 a.m., a precautionary dispersal that had become standard during Taiwan Strait tension periods, were 340 miles southeast of Guam when the third interceptor's impact occurred. They were unaffected. They continued their alert orbits. In the Combined Space Operations Center at Peterson, the post-engagement assessment was running at 3:53 a.m. while the debris field was still descending. The assessment documented a first operational employment of the fractional orbital bombardment trajectory by a state adversary since the Soviet FOBS system's retirement in 1983. It documented the Space Fence's role as the decisive sensor that had provided the approach azimuth confirmation. Without the Space Fence track, the THAAD engagement would have had insufficient time to generate its corridor intercept solution. And it documented the 31% single interceptor probability that the fire control system had assessed, and the specific engagement improvisation that had produced a successful intercept outcome, despite that probability. Time from launch detection to THAAD engagement authorization, 4 minutes. Time from definitive trajectory classification to THAAD interceptor launch, 1 minute. Time from THAAD launch to proximity detonation, 2 minutes. Time from proximity Detonation to guidance vehicle contact, 30 seconds. Time from glide vehicle launch to final debris field, 9 minutes. Glide vehicle trajectory, fractional orbital, southern approach, Andersen AFB terminal aim point. Glide vehicle maximum velocity, Mach 17.4. Terminal velocity at intercept, Mach 10. THAAD interceptors launched, 6. First interceptor, miss due to terminal maneuver. Second interceptor, proximity detonation, guidance and control surface damage. Third interceptor, guidance vehicle contact, structural compromise. Glide vehicle controlled flight, terminated. Fragment impacts on Andersen. 3. North boundary, no facilities damaged, no personnel injured. U.S. munitions expended. 6 THAAD interceptors at $10.2 million each, $61.2 million total. 3 SM-3 Block IIB interceptors at $31.4 million each, $94.2 million. Total, $155.4 million. PLA investment in the DF-41 FOBS variant program, assessed at $6.8 to $9.1 billion over 11 years. The vehicle reached its target area. It did not reach its target. The gap between reaching the target area and reaching the target was created by a proximity detonation at 47 meters offset and 30 seconds of terminal guidance damage that had reduced control authority below the threshold required to correct inertial navigation error. 47 meters, 30 seconds. The margin between the first operational fractional orbital bombardment success and the first operational fractional orbital bombardment failure. The engagement had validated 4 things simultaneously. The Space Fence's value as an early classification sensor for non-standard trajectories. Without Kwajalein's track data, the THAAD battery would have had insufficient approach azimuth confidence to generate its corridor intercept solution before the engagement window closed. The SM-3 Block IIB's engagement window against boost phase, a window that had been too narrow for this specific event, but that would be refined in subsequent doctrine updates, with forward basing options and launch authority pre-delegation timelines specifically adjusted for the 46-second gap that this event had identified. The THAAD system's ability to improvise a corridor intercept solution against a threat type it had not been specifically tested against. The fire control team's 7-minute adaptation had produced an outcome that the system's formal test program had never attempted, and the guidance data link's ability to update in-flight interceptors with refined track data in under 60 seconds, from sensor acquisition to trajectory adjustment. All 4 capabilities had been theoretical before 3:44 a.m. At 3:53 a.m., they were operational. The first fractional orbital bombardment attempt in 40 years had produced the most concentrated operational validation of missile defense architecture ever achieved in a live engagement. The PLA Rocket Force had spent 11 years developing a warhead that would defeat the existing missile defense architecture by approaching from an unexpected direction at an unprecedented velocity. The engagement at 3:52 a.m. had been decided not by the approach direction or the velocity, but by a proximity detonation at 47 meters and the 30 seconds of guidance degradation that followed. The margin was not comfortable. The outcome was